Hello and welcome to another video from salesberg.com. In this video we shall be looking at Bitfenix Shinobi XL computer case. As far as packaging goes, it comes in the standard cardboard box, though in the inside, instead of styrofoam, it contains soft foam packaging. Out of the box we are greeted with the nice, simple, minimalistic design of the case, and the front surface is coated with what Bitfenix calls soft touch surface treatment. At the front panel there are also mesh grill for added ventilation. At the top I/O panel there is a yellow USB port, which is not for data connectivity but rather a charging only port, which can be very handy, might even make the phone chargers obsolete. Additional to that, there are also 4 USB 3 ports, which can also be used as USB 2, and of course the usual headphone mic and power and reset buttons. To open the side panel we'll need to pull it out first, but there weren't many places to hold it, and the side panel is made of quite thick metal. It's very heavy as well.
Okay, let's look at the rear panel. So at the top there's the cutout for the top panel to be removed. We hold it and pull up to lift the top panel. Next, the 4 holes for the liquid cooling pipes to pass through. These are nicely rubber grommeted. They're very nice soft rubber grommets. Over here we have the position for the 120mm included fan. There's also screw mounting points for 140mm, and underneath that is the 9 expansion ports. Now these included plate covers are vented, which is quite nice. And over here, the part of the panel normally has ventilation holes, but this one is solid. And at the bottom, the position for the power supply. Just underneath the power supply there is the filter. There are more filter in front of it, but this one just covers the power supply.
The motherboard tray looks very promising. There are screw points which is labeled for different motherboard sizes, and it is painted black going with the theme, and the size it accommodates is up to XL-ATX motherboards. There are 5 5¼ inch drive bays, and they use tool-free mechanisms, which we shall be looking at in detail later. There were 7 3½ inch drive trays, which can also be used for 2½ inch drives, but they seem to be a little bit weak to me. Now let's look at the I/O cables. There's a SATA power connector for the charger port, and then of course there's the usual audio connections and USB connections. As I mentioned earlier, the USB 3 headers also have a USB 2 bypass, and the LEDs and switch, they have black cable, keeping with the theme of black. The accessories includes lots of screws, a drive bay adapter, some stickers for cable routing, cable ties, and a buzzer. At the bottom of the case there are 4 rubber footing which should absorb some of the vibration, and of course there's the filters. The 2 filters that are at the 120mm fan positions uses the same screw points as the fan would use, which would complicate things a little bit. At the top of the case there's the included 230mm fan. None of the fans can be attached on the top side of the panel because of the top cover. See the 2 parallel lines? That is actually part of the top cover, and it will prevent any fans to be positioned on the top of the panel.
Okay, rear of the motherboard tray. There are quite a few things that I do like about this, and the first thing that I'll need to mention is the fact that there are many positions for tying the cable ties. Now this will obviously help us a lot in cable management. Generally a lot of good cases even skips out on that. Now the advantage is that when you have a lot of them, you can tie different cables to different bunches and tie them up to different positions over here. Next thing to mention is that there are lots of cutouts for cables to pass through from above the motherboard side, below. And the next thing to mention is that there's this reasonably large sized cutout for the CPU cooler's backplate to be installed. this should do the job quite adequately, and we will be installing a CPU cooler which uses a backplate to see how it goes. Now the all-important question, how much space do we actually have behind the motherboard's tray? Let's measure it. The clearance is about 3 centimeters, which should be adequate for lots of cables. Why is this so important? Well, see, all the cutouts, the points for cable tie positions and so forth will be somewhat rendered useless if the clearance is very shallow. We can't have any cables behind, because once we close the side panel, it will either push on the cable so hard that it'll practically destroy the cables, or you can't just shut the side panel at all, which is the case with a lot of cases out there. Now, this should do quite well over here, and we shall actually test it out as well, fitting out all the cables and so forth, how much the space is and how well it is oriented. So let's look at the top of the case. Now, to open the top panel, we have to hold it from this position over here and pull. It pops up. Needs quite a bit of strength, as you saw, and it pops up, making the sound it made just now, but nonetheless it pops up. Underneath which there are lots of different options for different type of fans to be installed. Now, a quick note, this panel, once it is taken off, it can just be taken away because the cables are over here. So yeah, nonetheless we can still work as far as our fan installation and so forth is concerned. The fans that can be installed on the top part of the case, two 230mm fans or three 120mm fans, and obviously the 120mm fans are optional, and the second 230mm fan is also optional. Next thing that needs mentioning is that on the top side of the case we cannot install any fans. Reason being that there's only mounting point for 120mm fan, but the top panel that we removed does not allow a 120mm fan to exist over here. There's just not enough space. However, having said that, at the bottom there is about approximately 7 centimeters worth of clearance before the motherboard starts. So we can have a relatively large radiator and then a fan, maybe even push-pull configuration, but you might need slimmer fans to be able to achieve that. But nonetheless, there's ample amount of space here for a lot of different options. So the installation is on its way. It's not fully complete, but before I do that, I wanted to say a few things. The cable tie points are coming in very handy. There are 3 rows, as you can see, and this allows me to spread it out a little bit better. A lot of the cases have just single row at the center, and all the cables tend to just make a big pile and then the cover wouldn't shut. Over here it's much more managed, and this little cut over here is actually quite handy. I passed the EPS connector from behind that. So the only drawback is something to say on the negative side would be that there aren't many cable tie points on this end. So still the cables are accumulated on the other side. It would have been very nice, but they were on a roll. Why did they stop up till over here? Why not just give us another row over here? I'm just picking on things, but nonetheless, also the cable tie points on the top, very handy. And as you can see over here, the cutout for the CPU cooler's retention plate is sufficiently large. I had no issues installing the CPU cooler at all. Now, moment of truth, something I've been waiting for. I'll close the side panel. Let's see if we have to struggle, if it's gonna be a lot of effort, or anyhow we line up on the front like so, and then, no, that was sweet. No struggle at all. It seems like there's plenty of space in there, so it didn't even cause any resistance. All I have to do is take this thumb screw over here, put it in place. Ta-da! How exciting. Okay, installation of optical drive. Now, this is something that I needed to mention as well about the tool-free locking mechanism. This is the one thing that, say, we press and slide to lock, except the drive does not lock. Now, it prevents it from going in, but it doesn't prevent it from going out. So let's do that again. Press, slide, locks, or press, slide forward as well. That way locks as well, but it's still loose. It locks like so. Now, that's not right. It's way in. It does not hold the optical drive when the drive is flush to the front face. So which means we have to take this out and use screws.
Once motherboard and the other components were installed, there were ample room remaining inside the case. We could be adding a lot of different components inside the computer and there will still be room to work. Because of the amount of space we have, I found it quite easy to put my hand inside and connect various cables or do work in general with much more ease than cases of smaller proportion. Not to say that smaller cases are less useful, just with a bigger case we have more room, that's all. The downside to this was that bigger the case, the more metal it uses, and therefore it's much heavier as well. Someone frequenting the LAN parties would not want to lug this around. Further compromises were seen at the 3.5-inch drive trays, which were too soft for my liking, and the optical drive tool-free mechanism really could have been better. And let's not forget the top cover. If it was designed slightly differently, it would have given us so many other options for cooling. What I'm trying to say is that this case had so much more potential on top of what it already is. True, there are shortcomings with this case, but if we built a system to its capacity, it will be a pretty good one, that's for sure. There is room for plenty of fans, and of course water cooling shouldn't be any issue at all. And also the cable management is one of the better ones that's around. And of course its most redeeming feature being that it houses a XL-ATX motherboard. The case comes in the market priced very competitively, therefore a very good value proposition. Someone building a system once completes the system and he doesn't intend to travel much, he will actually like it quite much. The shortcomings that I did mention would most likely be forgotten over time. It's inconvenient at the time of installation, but once installation is complete, it's done and over with. From that point on, it would be more like they lived happily ever after. Thank you for watching the video. I hope you've enjoyed it. Your comments and suggestions are most welcome. Please subscribe in order to stay updated with our latest videos. Bye for now.